Hello everyone, my name is Nitsu, and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT12, and BT12 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to be able to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be Blackwargreymon. So Blackwargreymon has two major variants of the deck, but they're mostly playing relatively similar, with the only real difference being the top end. So your two major options are you could either take the approach on utilizing BlackWarGreymon and BlackWarGreymon X/Agumon, or you could take the approach on utilizing WarGreymon and WarGreymon X. And the real difference between them is BlackWarGreymon is a little bit more control orientated and more defensive based, where WarGreymon is more aggressively focused and more offensively based. But they're going to be utilizing a lot of very similar parts and pieces just because of how much support Agumon and Greymon has gotten over the past couple of sets. So with all that said and done, let's just dive right into the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm only going to be running 4 Digitamas, and it's going to be 4 copies of the BT9 Koromon. I don't necessarily care about the card draw just because I'm not necessarily aggressing super early on, so by the time I would get the card draw, it doesn't necessarily seem super relevant, which is why I'm going to be choosing to go with the DP booster, especially to pair up with the raid ability to be able to make my Digimon as strong as it can possibly be when I'm trying to control the opponent's field. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Agumon. So this is the BT5 version of Agumon, and this is just going to be your stereotypical digging tool to try to add some extra consistency into the deck. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon X Antibody. So this is another consistency tool while also being an X Antibody to try to, again, make the deck as consistent as it possibly can, looking for our Greymons, Omnimons, and X Antibody option. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of the promo Agumon. So this promo version of Agumon is still really good for the deck just because we're trying to attack into the opponent's Digimon, and we need to make sure ours is going to be stronger than theirs. So this is just one of the best Agumons to try to DP boost our Digimon. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be the newest inclusion, and that's going to be 4 copies of the BT12 Agumon. So not only is this a good consistency tool doing something very similar to what we just saw with the BT5 Agumon, where it's looking for our Greymons and Omnimons, but it also has the added benefit of trying to look for our Tai Kamiya tamers. Then on top of that, it also has the best of both worlds, having a nice inheritable ability that's also DP boosting our Digimon, not only during our turn, but the opponent's turn as well, making it even harder for the opponents to deal with our Digimon at times, while also trying to make our Digimon stronger than the opponents. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Greymon X Antibody. So Greymon X Antibody from BT9 is still a really good card just because it's adding a lot of extra protections, making it very hard for the opponent to deal with our Digimon, while also being a Greymon and an X Antibody Digimon, so that way we could try to gain the most out of a lot of our abilities. So the inheritable ability requires 2 Digimon of the same level in its Digivolution source. When it would be deleted or returned to the hand or deck, we get to trash those sources instead to prevent the Digimon from leaving play. So again, it just is trying to make our Digimon more obnoxious for the opponents to deal with, so that way we could try to keep them around and get as much value off of our cards as we possibly can. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Greymon. So this is kind of a tech or flex spot for the deck, but I'm going to be utilizing the starter deck Greymon just because it has the inheritable ability of Security Attack Plus. If you want to add more DP, then by all means do so. I just want to actually have the ability to try to deal some good damage onto the opponent and take advantage of all of the other DP boosts that I have already in the deck, so that way I can try to close out the game as quickly as I possibly can when I need to. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Greymon X Antibody. So this is the BT11 version of Greymon X Antibody, and this card is so good that it got limited down to 1, just because of how tempo efficient this card would be making the deck otherwise. So what this card is doing is it allows us to reduce the Digivolution cost of our Greymon Digimon that we're digivolving into for each color that Digimon has. So pair this up with the brand new BT12 MetalGreymon, and then we basically get to digivolve for 1 into a level 5, which just allows us to turbo into our higher stage Digimon on top of any memory gain that we could possibly have in the deck already, to be able to make it digivolving even cheaper and easier thanks to this card. And on top of that, it also offers all of the same protections as the old BT9 Greymon X Antibody. It's just utilizing the X Antibody option as the cost to be able to keep our Digimon around, but still all of that added protection just makes our Digimon harder for the opponent to deal with. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of the brand new BT12 Greymon. So this brand new version of Greymon is really good just because even though it says that it digivolves for 3 on top of a black Digimon, we're never actually going to be doing that, and we're always going to be digivolving it for 2 on top of a Digimon with Agumon in its name. And yes, this does include Agumon X Antibody, so that way we could be able to utilize any of our level 3s to efficiently digivolve into this card. And we want to digivolve into this card just because it helps us set up our tamer, so that way we could try to make sure that we're always going to have a tamer in play to make our plays as powerful and consistent as we can possibly make it, while also offering that same DP boost during all turns that we saw with the Agumon, to be able to make our Digimon as strong as it possibly can be during all stages of the game. Next, on to the Ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of MetalGreymon X Antibody. So MetalGreymon X Antibody from BT9 wants to be played more inside the WarGreymon package, just because the WarGreymon package is trying to be more aggressive than the BlackWargreymon package. But regardless, MetalGreymon X Antibody is still a very powerful card for this deck to use still, just because its when digivolving ability allows us to gain security attack plus. Then if he's on top of a MetalGreymon or the Digimon has X Antibody in its Digivolution source, it's going to be gaining plus 3000 DP until the end of the opponent's turn, so that buff does persist, and that buff also will carry over onto your higher stage Digimon, so that way we could tempo up into our MetalGreymon, digivolve into a MetalGreymon X Antibody, get all of the buffs and benefits, then digivolve into our WarGreymon to then be able to utilize it to attack it into the opponent to deal some devastating damage. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 4 copies of the brand new MetalGreymon. So similarly to the brand new Greymon that we saw from BT12, this also has those 2 different Digivolution conditions where we're almost never digivolving it for its normal cost, and we're always digivolving it for its special cost by digivolving it for 3 on top of a Digimon with Greymon in its name, making it a little bit more tempo efficient. Then this Digimon does come with the raid ability, so we could try to be aggressive and controlling with this Digimon as well, so we could attack into the opponent's unsuspended Digimon with the highest DP, and thanks to all of the potential DP boosts that we could give this card, he could have some pretty decent reach. Then on top of that, during all turns, he also allows us to set up our tamer when the attack of our Digimon switches targets utilizing the raid ability, or if the opponent is utilizing something like a blocker or redirect ability, then it gives us more usability on being able to set up our tamers, while also having a nice inheritable ability at the same time to be able to give our Greymons and Omnimons the piercing ability. Next, on to the Megas, I'm going to be running 2 copies of WarGreymon X Antibody. So WarGreymon X Antibody, obviously we want to pair up with WarGreymon just because it adds extra usability to our WarGreymon, and it makes this card super powerful to be able to use, just because during all turns when a card is removed from the opponent's security stack, we get to gain 1 memory, and the higher security attack this Digimon has, the more memory we'll be able to gain to be able to not pass the turn or just make more powerful follow-up plays possible because of how much memory we could potentially be gaining. gaining. Then he also has an ability that triggers at the end of the attack, where it's just utilizing the fact that he wants to be on top of a WarGreymon or have X Antibody in its Digivolution source to be able to delete the opponent's Digimon with DP equal to or less than this Digimon for some good added removal. But the brand new star of the show is going to be 4 copies of the brand new WarGreymon from BT12. So this always is going to be digivolving for 3 instead of 4, so we're going to be more tempo efficient again than what the opponent might be anticipating, and this card is super powerful because like the MetalGreymon, it also comes with the raid ability to be able to attack into the opponent's strongest Digimon, so that way we have easy ways at being able to clear their field when we need to, on top of a Wind Digivolving ability for some extra DP boosting and the reboot ability, which is really good at, again, making our Digimon even harder for the opponent to interact with, and another All Turns ability where we get to unsuspend this Digimon when an attack changes its target. So again, whether we're utilizing blocker or the opponent is utilizing blocker, or when we're utilizing raid, it doesn't necessarily matter. This card just has some really powerful abilities to be able to attack potentially multiple times or defend potentially multiple times, making him just a very versatile Digimon for us to use. And then lastly, on to the level 7s, when it comes to Digimon, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Omnimon. So this is the BT5 version of Omnimon, and this is mostly just going to be in the deck to act as an alternative win condition, just because he has 2 Wind Digivolving abilities of unsuspending this Digimon and Blitz to be able to allow us to gain an extra attack out of nowhere to potentially close the game with, or utilize in some very interesting combos to make for an even harder body for the opponent to remove. And then the last Digimon of the deck is going to be 1 copy of Omnimon X Antibody. So this is the BT10 version of Omnimon X Antibody, and similarly to the BT5 version of Omnimon, this is just going to be in here mostly to act as an alternative win condition, just because his Wind Digivolving ability allows us to be able to utilize our stack to be able to check the opponent's security and trash a card from their security. So if they're at 1 security and we attack with this card, then we get to basically get rid of their last card in their security and be swinging for the game, on top of his other Wind Digivolving ability to add some extra removal, and we could utilize him with our Omnimon, just because we could utilize Omnimon and the X Antibody option to gain an extra attack and utilize that to Digivolve into Omnimon X Antibody to then do the same type of thing, again trying to extend our plays and make them as powerful and aggressive as we can possibly make them. Next, on to the Tamers, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Tai Kamiya. So this is the BT1 version of Tai Kamiya, and this is another tech or flex spot for the deck. It doesn't necessarily have to be Tai Kamiya, it's just we're already interacting and synergizing with Tai Kamiyas, so might as well just have the Tai Kamiya that best works for the deck, just because he's going to be the deck's dedicated memory setter, he's going to be a good red source for us to use for our options, and on top of that, he's going to allow our Digimon to gain Security Attack Plus, while it has 4 or more Digivolution sources in it, so this just combos with a lot of different cards in the deck, making it just one of the better tamers for us to think about utilizing. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of the BT12 Tai Kamiya. So this is the Tai Kamiya we want to see more often than not, just because he has some really decent abilities attached to him, not only allowing us to be able to try to gain some memory when we're digivolving up our stages, so that way we can make our plays more tempo efficient, but it also has an ability that triggers at the start of our turn and when we play it, to be able to give our Agumons and our Greymons an extra DP boost and the blocker ability, so that way we have some really good lines of offensive plays and defensive plays as well. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Cool Boy, just because, well, we're still an X Antibody based deck, we're still running the X Antibody option and a whole bunch of X form Digimon, so it just makes utilizing this card really easy at being a good consistency tool, looking for those cards, on top of the fact that when we utilize X Digimon on top of their base form, then we're going to be gaining some extra tempo and resources to be able to make more powerful and more consistent lines of play even possible. And then when it comes to options, I'm going to be running one copy of Hades Force. So Hades Force still works with this deck just because we have a lot of access at red and black, and we have access at the X Antibody option to be able to reduce the cost of utilizing this card to try to delete the opponent's tamers up to the play cost of one of the Greymons that we are selecting, which if we're going to be utilizing this card, then we should be using it on one of our WarGreymons. Then on top of that, it has a nice security ability that's acting as some good removal for the opponent's strongest Digimon, making it a well-rounded removal option card. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 2 copies of the X Antibody option. So X Antibody is still just an absolutely fantastic card because of how much utility we could gain off of this card, just because we could use it in our security to be able to anti-tempo the opponent, and we have the ability to just shove it underneath one of our Digimon to be able to gain its inheritable abilities to protect our stack a little bit in case the opponent's trying to attack our inheritables, on top of the fact that the when attacking ability to basically digivolve mid-attack into an X-form Digimon just allows us to make some absolutely insane levels of combo play to try to overwhelm the opponent with some of our potential power plays. And then as far as the overall game plan and gameplay of the deck goes, it is just your stereotypical stack-based deck where you're just trying to build one super stack in raising and be able to move it out to try to start aggressing onto the opponent if you're ahead, or use it reactionary to be able to punish the opponent's potential line of play. But regardless, we're just going to be trying to play to our deck's own strengths. So when it comes to our level 3s, we have a lot of decent level 3s that we could utilize. We have 2 of them that have the ability to gain us some extra DP when we're using our higher stage Digimon. So these are the ones that we're going to want to prioritize in our raising area. And then the others are just going to be really good at just trying to help find our parts and pieces and maybe potentially start a secondary stack. So the fact that we have so many different searching tools only adds to the deck's benefit, but for the sake of the example on this stack, I'm just going to be using a generic DP booster, so that way I can know that I'm going to be making my Digimon as powerful as it possibly can, and then the X Antibody Digimon comes in handy at being able to gain some extra cycling and Digivolve on top for an extra inheritable, which could matter depending on some of the other cards that we see and have in play. Then from here, we have a couple of different options. We could either try to build a level 4 in our raising, or we could Digivolve on top of our level 4 out of raising. So assuming that the opponent, let's just say, puts us to 2, we can move out Digivolve from here into a Greymon. So with the brand new Greymon, that would allow us to go to 0, and then we get to play either of our Tai Kamiyas, so that way we can have a tamer set up on the field and not necessarily waste time trying to set it up ourselves, and it's just doing it for us. And if we're utilizing the brand new Tai Kamiya, this just is really, really good, because then we can Digivolve, let's just say, into an X Antibody Digimon. The ideal X Antibody is going to be the BT11 Greymon, just because of that cost reduction, and then from this type of a position, we get a Digivolve for 1 into a MetalGreymon, and if we set up the Tai Kamiya, then we get to suspend the Tai Kamiya to gain the memory, so it's basically like a free Digivolution into our level 5, so that way we then can Digivolve into our other level 5, the X-form Digimon, to gain all of the buffs and benefits, and then be able to utilize some various other cards from here, depending on what the position of the field is, to be able to start aggressing with this card, just because of all of the different buffs that he would have, to be able to make those aggressive lines of play. Or we could utilize the X Antibody option to then swing at the opponent's security and to Digivolve mid-attack into our WarGreymon X Antibody, or try to Digivolve into our WarGreymon if we don't have the X Antibody option, and we still just want to have a really powerful defensive Digimon, just because the brand new Tai would have been able to give this stack blocker, and if we already made that swing, then it'll also have the reboot ability to be able to unsuspend itself. So you could kind of see from this type of a position that you just already have a lot of ways to be able to be super tempo efficient, and not to mention if you're your other tamers are set up, then we have even more potential lines of play available to us, just because the old Tai Kamiya from BT1 will be able to make our security attack extra strong. So when we utilize a stack utilizing the Greymon from the starter deck instead of the Greymon from BT12, and we're trying to build more in raising, then we could still digivolve into our X form, still digivolve into our MetalGreymon, and into our MetalGreymon X. So when we're utilizing this stack, then we would be swinging for 4 checks, and if we're swinging into the opponent's Digimon because of Raid, and we have Piercing with our MetalGreymon, then he's going to be able to unsuspend and attack again, so that way we can have really quick and easy ways at being able to close out games, especially if we have the X Antibody option to then digivolve into Omnimon, or digivolve into Omnimon X, or even just digivolve into WarGreymon on our first or secondary swing, depending on where the state of the board is and the cards you have available. So there's just a lot of different levels of combo play you have in being able to build your stack and what you could do with your stack, on top of a lot of good consistency in searching tools. And once we have our tamers set up, then we just are able to do a lot of various different things because of how tempo and memory efficient we could be with a lot of our cards, which is why the Greymon from BT11 did get limited to 1, was more because of the BT12 MetalGreymon making our plays super tempo efficient, and that's kind of why we have to run the other Greymon X Antibody in its place. So even though it's not going to be as tempo efficient, with our tamer set up, we still have the ability to gain lots of memory and be able to make a lot of powerful plays possible. And then, as I mentioned before, the deck is going to be very similar to how BlackWarGreymon wants to play and how you would go about building that deck. So they're sharing and utilizing a lot of various different parts and pieces. Yes, you could build a black low end just because there are enough black Agumons to be able to utilize a black low end. And we do have the black Koromon to be able to synergize with it as well. But it's going to be accomplishing borderline the same exact thing as what you would be doing with the red low end. Then when it comes to your level 4s, you're still going to be stuck running relatively similar level 4s. You're still going to want to utilize the brand new Greymon and the Greymon X Antibodies, and then you just have a flexible Greymon slot to basically play whatever other Greymons you want to utilize. Then when it comes to the level 5s, you're just going to be swapping out the more WarGreymon based level 5s for the BlackWargreymon based level 5s. On top of the fact that your level 6s obviously are going to swap from WarGreymon level 6s to BlackWargreymon level 6s. The Omnimons, I think that the defensive nature and more control style wants you to play the BT5 Omnimon X Antibody, and then the options and tamers are going to again be relatively similar. You're going to be swapping out some various other different parts and pieces, like you don't need the BT1 Tai, and you could run something like Yuya Kuga instead, just because he has more protections that he's going to be giving your Digimon, and he has some extra DP gaining that we could use to be able to wall out the opponent, again taking the deck in a more defensive and control-orientated style versus WarGreymon. But there is just a lot of interchangeable parts and pieces between the two decks and the two different builds, and you could kind of also build like a hybrid build utilizing a lot of various parts and pieces from both ends of the spectrum, just because a lot of the cards are just looking for Greymon-based synergies, so they all just meld and mesh together. So as I mentioned before, you have the Black Agumon low end that you could run in combination with the BT12 one, just because we do have the Searcher Agumon that's acting like the BT5 Agumon, and then we also have the Black Agumon X, which obviously would replace the Red Agumon X. Then we do have some various other cute Agumons that we could think about running inside of the deck, like the EX1 Agumon if we're trying to dig out our Tamers and our other Agumons, and then we even have a little bit of Marcus's Agumon that we could run, and some Marcus synergy, just because, again, it's all playing around with Agumons and Greymons. Then, speaking of other Greymons, we do have some pretty decent other level 4 Greymons to think about, like the BT2 one, more so if you're playing with BlackWarGreymon because he has a lot of reboot over on his level 6 end of the spectrum. And you also have the BT8 Greymon to be able to gain blocker for when you don't have Tai Kamiya on the field. And you even have a card like EX1 Greymon to be able to play your brand new black Tai Kamiya for free, just to be able to have alternative ways to be able to set up your tamers. Then when it comes to the level 5s, I kind of already have a whole bunch of really decent level 5s you're already going to be using between the two packages, and you could just splash in an Alteris mode just for some extra Digivolution cycling and control on top of an extra instance of a protection inheritable, similarly to what the BT9-Greymon X Antibody is doing. Then when it comes to the level 6s, we do have some pretty decent other level 6s that we could think about incorporating. So if you wanted to spice up BlackWarGreymon and run some Digiburst just because we can make a really large stack, then we could utilize the promo BlackWarGreymon just to try to turn the Greymon deck into a more offensive style of deck. And then we do have other WarGreymons that we could splash into the deck. Then we do have some various other options that we could think about running in the deck. So if you want, you could run some memory boosts and win rate 60% just to try to be more tempo efficient. And we have just a slew of different removal cards that we could utilize as well. And as I mentioned before, we do have some various other tamers like Marcus and some Marcus-based cards that we could splash into the deck as well, because it's all just synergizing with Greymons. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.